It almost makes you sick just to keep repeating it, but none of this would be happening, or it would be happening in a much more restrained way if there were somebody defending the rest of the country up there, but there doesn't seem to be.
No, and that's supposed to be the Republican Party. That's a big reason why I jumped in and have decided to run for Congress. The woman who I voted for, the Republican that I voted for the impeachment of President Trump, which gave this January 6th narrative, which is being smeared against every conservative or anybody who has an issue with the way things are being conducted in the country or the way the last election went. It's being used to turn the national security state against us. She voted for that impeachment, and then she voted for the formation of this very sham trial Soviet kangaroo court we're seeing right now. She voted for the January 6th committee. She also voted to hold people in contempt, private citizens who weren't even present on the steps there on the ground during January 6th. So we have to hold this Republican leadership accountable. It is their job to stand in the breach and defend their people from this type of overstep from the Democrats and the national security state. And if they fail to do that, they deserve to be primaried. And that's exactly what I'm doing. It's absolutely absurd and insulting. She thinks that we can't go back and look at her record, that she's been lying to the American people basically for her entire career and profiting off of it. But also she has to bring up this whole, it must be a big Trump thing. No, it's not a Trump thing. There is the fact of the matter. The only reason that people were there on that day of January 6th is that the American people, a vast majority of them, did not feel like their voices were heard at the election box. And therefore, things started to get a little bit dicey. And if our ruling class won't go back and actually adjudicate what happened with our elections, our system is going to continue to decay. And no matter how much people in Congress lecture us or ignore these problems, our system will crumble until we get people in there, like I think we're going to have this November, that can actually say, hey, we hear you. We're going to go back. We're going to look at the election of 2020. We're going to have a full committee. We're going to keep the January 6th committee going. We're going to disclose to the American people once and for all what actually happened, release all the footage, disclose the government's involvement. We have to start respecting our people once again. Everything that Liz Cheney just said, everything the woman that I'm running against, Jamie Herrera Butler, who's too afraid to come face her constituents or face me in a debate, everything they stand for, we have to cast that off if we are going to preserve this republic.
Turn now to Joe Kent for reaction. He's a former Army Special Forces, and he's running for Congress in the state of Washington. Joe, it's great to have you with us tonight. Year 5, I believe we are year 6. Basically, from before Donald Trump's election to tonight, we have seen investigation after investigation and allegation after allegation. Do you think tonight, what we are looking at now, will be any different than the outcome of the past 6 years? Or will it simply be another illustration of the power of an allegation?
Well, it has to be different than what we've seen before, because we've seen the complete and total weaponization of our national security state. You mentioned how this all began with the Russiagate sham hoax, and we saw the national security state at the highest levels weaponized against President Trump and his campaign, then throughout his administration. And now with the narrative coming from January 6th, and make no mistake, this is where the narrative really was fortified to turn these potent tools against not just President Trump, but many of his top advisors, people who weren't even on the ground January 6th, and then folks that were put away, thrown into essentially political prisons without any kind of due process. And now the national security state continues to be on the hunt against President Trump, and even all the way down to parents that show up to school board meetings. So we have to realize that we're at war. When we take back the House in 2023, bringing the national security state to heel must be our top priority. Any Republican who is not ready for that fight is unfit for duty.
You know, Joe, I've mentioned this several times tonight, but I imagine if you're sitting at home watching, this sense of and we heard earlier on the program, it's not simply corruption. It's just what we're watching unfold in America isn't limited to, as you mentioned, the national security state. It's not limited to law enforcement. You, I think, very aptly, Joe, pointed out school board meetings, which, of course, the DOJ classified those parents as domestic terrorists. But beyond that, censorship within big technology. It's hard, I would imagine, for an American citizen who doesn't subscribe to the current thing, whatever that political philosophy may be driving it, but whatever is the current thing, to think there's anything even resembling a fair playing field in America.
No, not at all. And I served for a while in the military. I was in special forces. I served in lots of third world countries that were really ran as police and security states. And I think that's the reason why a lot of this looks very familiar to me. But if you're an American and you've enjoyed how great this country is, where we have these freedoms, this is hard to recognize. But people need to recognize exactly what this is. It's the totality of this regime. And I call it a regime because it's the weaponization of the national security state. They're partners in big tech, like you mentioned, and it's really being totally weaponized against anyone who doesn't fully comply. I mean, President Trump said for years that it wasn't him that they were after, it was just us. He happened to be in the way. Well, even now that he's really kind of out of the way, he's potentially rising back up again. They're going after him, but it's a total full frontal assault. They're going after every single one of us. So we really have to start electing Republicans who know what time it is, because our one hope of saving this republic is going to be fought out on the floor of the Oversight Committee. And we have to not just bring these people to heel, but we have to start bringing them to full account. And I mean, criminal charges too, not just, sound clips for how we're really going to take them on that turn into fundraising asks. We really have to start going after these people and taking away their power.